It's Friday, July 19th. Let's talk PlayStation. Before we get into that first news story, we got to go over our PlayStation Plus Instant Game Collection reminders. So for the month of July 2019, Horizon Chase Turbo and Detroit Become Human. You got just a few weeks left, so you better grab these if you are at all interested in them. Now, our first news story, PlayStation 4 firmware 6.72 is available right now. Nothing crazy, of course, just performance improvements, and it's mandated now, so if you want to go online on PSN, you have to have it installed. Now, something a bit more interesting, well, it doesn't seem like that on the surface, but is, Sony San Diego studio has a new logo, and it looks cool, very modern, but I'm seeing a lot of people not realize that they also just moved into new office space, so much nicer building it looks like. They're posting a few pictures and whatnot, and a lot of amenities, improving the quality of life of the employees. But this kind of goes into what we've been talking about with Worldwide Studios, which is that Sony's reinvesting into the studios. So we're seeing a lot of expansions, like Guerrilla Games, for example, are still getting prepped to move into their new office space. And now we've got San Diego Studios moving into a bigger space as well, which means they could definitely bring on more employees. And we still have a rumor regarding them. We haven't had a rumor update on this in a while, but there is still that rumor that says that there's another team forming within San Diego Studios, working with the Visual Arts Service Group, collaborating with Naughty Dog on possibly an unannounced project. Well, we basically know that's happening at this point, but it's a matter of when we'll see this project, what it turns into, if this will be another separate studio entirely, or if San Diego's just splitting into two teams, if it's its own little new Uncharted game. That's kind of what a lot of people are sort of pointing it towards, and I could see that theory working out quite well, but that's just something where it's like, okay, we've got a studio expansion, so maybe there's a little something to that now, to where we'll see something in the future. Now, getting into a developer that's not part of Worldwide Studios and Insomniac Games, their game SpiderMan on PS4 did really well, and we know it did really well, but apparently Matt Piscatella from MPD has revealed that since May of this year, Spider-Man has now outsold every other superhero game in the United States, and so it's number one. And if you look at the top 10 list, pretty much the rest of those games are all multi-platform games, so it's very impressive that Spider-Man outsold all those other versions combined in total. I mean, that's crazy. And it just kind of re-solidifies that whether it's a first party or a second party, Sony's going to double down pretty hard. They're not going to walk away from this franchise, and they're certainly not going to walk away from their very long-standing working relationship with Insomniac, so surely we're going to see another Spider-Man or another project that's entirely different out of Insomniac Games, but Sony's going to keep working with them for sure. Now, if you didn't see, because a lot of the deals are already over, but we still got to talk about it just because it's so ridiculous, during the Amazon Prime Day, and even like outside of Amazon Prime, places like Target, Best Buy, were selling PlayStation Classics for as little as $20, which is so heinously low. And I even tweeted about this. I'm like, dude, I've spent more money at fast food restaurants. It's crazy that there's still all this unsold inventory of PlayStation Classics, which makes me think, like, how many of these were manufactured? Did Sony really think this was just going to be a ballpark, like easy home run? Like, what happened here? Or is it just a matter of, is it not selling that so heinously bad that even whatever was manufactured still can't be offloaded? Either way, at $20, you don't even have to play the thing. You can just keep it as a shelf decoration, which is what mine has turned into, more or less. The box and the actual little mini console. And that's what we were saying even when it was coming out at $100, which is that not many people are going to, like, realistically play the damn thing. I mean, if they are, then they're going to, load it up with, hundreds of games, which is what people really did with it. And so at $20, that's a great buy as well. But it's just crazy to see it go that low, and I would be shocked if it somehow got even lower than that. So anyway, coming up on August 1st is going to be Sony's China Joy press conference, which is going to be about a 2-hour-long event. Now, I wouldn't expect anything substantial out of it, because this is really Sony's going to be probably showcasing a lot of stuff out of their China Hero project, which, if you don't know, that's the initiative that Sony does to help smaller Chinese developers get into the games market. So they fund a lot of their titles and whatnot. I'm sure there's help with the free SDKs or something, payment plans, whatever they do, but you're going to be seeing a lot of games out of that initiative. And so these are games that not only are released for the Chinese market, but globally as well. So you can expect these games to come to the West and everything. So, but just keep that in mind, that they are doing a little event coming up, and it's not going to be anything. It's not going to be anything crazy, right? You're not going to see Ghost of Tsushima or major, first party out of this, right? It's going to be a smaller show for sure. But while we're talking about a press conference, there's actually news that Sony's going to be at Gamescom 2019, which, is kind of a big deal, considering that, well, we know that they've been skipping all these trade shows because they just don't have anything, and that's just how they've lined up their announcements right now, which is that they're just doing state of play because it makes sense for the very little amount of announcements that they have. And the thing is, we don't necessarily know to the extent of what they're doing at Gamescom. I mean, as it stands right now, they apparently will be there. I would have to imagine it's just floor space. I can't see them holding a conference, certainly, because that kind of contradicts what they've been saying for a while now, which is that they don't have anything to show, and they don't really. We've been discussing how they might hold a PlayStation Experience, which is a different kind of show, right? Because PSX isn't a trade show. It's more a show for fans. That's essentially what it is. It's like a PAX. And so, you know, it's a publicly sold ticketed event, and that's where you could see something very substantial, like Sony possibly showing us what PlayStation 5 looks like in a greater capacity, and that would be very cool I think that'd be a good gesture to have a fan-oriented event to showcase the new hardware, and certainly you'd still have plenty of press there as well, because they just get their free ticket in there and whatnot, and they'd have their own front row of seats and whatnot for their amount of work. Maybe that, if this is all in theory, of course, if they were to hold an event, but that's kind of like the thing, is that if that was the case, it would probably be at something like PSX, or they'd hold their own event entirely in the first few months of 2020. So I can't see them doing anything crazy with Gamescom. I'd imagine it is just floor space with some demos and things like that. Maybe we'll get a trailer for one of their games coming up, like Last of Us Part 2 or something. Maybe we'll get a release date or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's still a place for something kind of cool, but don't expect anything that actually carries a good amount of weight to it. Now, we've got a new patent for PlayStation VR, and this was filed back in 2018, but recently published July 11th this year, so it actually took a little bit for this to get caught on, but this patent certainly describes the next generation PlayStation VR will probably be wireless, so that's what it displays in the pictures, to have eye tracking, and to use a new development technique called foveated rendering, which basically describes a situation where, in conjunction with the eye tracking, what you're looking at directly would be the highest peak resolution and performance, and everything around you, and your peripheral vision would be a lower resolution, and possibly, I would assume, a lower texture detail or something like that, right? And you kind of see this sometimes being used today to help with the motion sickness. So certain games have this sort of like a tunnel vision where you only see directly in front of you, and then it kind of blurs out a little bit behind you. I know that helped me a lot, actually, when I was if I would do a long session of Skyrim VR. But this is again on the development side of where it purposely will lower the stuff around you just to have a very clear image going forward. And the eye tracking, of course, is purposely in there to really kind of immerse yourself in the world, make it a little bit easier for you to not get as motion sick. And then there's also a description of, the use of gyroscopes, so the headset's going to be able to detect your head tilts and things like that. This, of course, goes into the immersion aspect of the device. But being wireless is also a huge thing, and this kind of goes into the rumors we've discussed before with PlayStation VR, and we've heard before that Sony's aiming for the Generation 2 version of this device to be anywhere from $300 to $250, which is extremely low, but it would support eye tracking, have a resolution of 2560 by 1440, 120 hertz refresh rate, 220 degree field of view, and those are all fantastic specs. It sounds great. I remember being very skeptical hearing all that, especially at a $250 price point. I would imagine it'd be a little bit higher than that, at around $300, which seems reasonable. But the more I think about it, the more I think, well, look at where we are right now, which is that it's 2019. Sony's already admitted that PlayStation VR 2, or whatever it's called, won't come out right away when PlayStation 5 comes out. If PlayStation 5 comes out, say holiday 2020, and they give it, say, a year and a half, 2 years out from that point forward, where they would then release the headset, I mean, at that point, we're already looking at 3 years of the current specs coming down in price to manufacture. And so at that point, I can reasonably see how they could maybe get to such a low price point with those kind of features. And the thing is, I mean, from what it does sound fantastic. If all those things are, say, included, I think they've solved a lot of the problems with the current Gen 1 headset, which is that it's definitely not for everybody. I mean, hell, the biggest one for me is that there's just so many damn cables, and that's, I think, maybe 95% of the time what stops me from playing it is that I have to drag the whole thing out, kind of loop it around my head. And I mean, if it was something where I could keep it on a desk docked, and the rumor did also describe it having anywhere from 5 hours of battery life, which is also pretty reasonable. You shouldn't even be playing VR for 5 hours straight. Now, people do, but you're not supposed to. So if you could dock it on a desk or something, and it's really something as simple as taking it on and off right then and there, right? It's the accessibility of it. but it is the motion blur too. I mean, it's everything about it, right? So Gen 2 of this device sounds awesome, and I think at this point, from what I'm saying, I mean, if we do see this thing, say 2022, I think at that point Sony can make the device hit all these rumored targets that we've been hearing. Now moving on, this one I really wanted to include because we're not really seeing a whole lot of developers talk about this, probably because they're really not allowed to say much, and that's why you're hearing this come from a developer that's not nearly as big. But the Pixelnauts developer, Alex Golbiowski, I hope I pronounced that last name correctly, but he was recently discussing with Gaming Bolt that he's super pumped that both Sony and Microsoft are going with SSDs in their next-gen consoles, and he was even quoted as saying, "What a great choice by both Sony and Microsoft. Load times will never be the same." And I mean, it's a simple quote really, but I think it kind of instills the excitement that a lot of developers are probably feeling about knowing the two big console manufacturers are going with SSD. That's a baseline at that point. This reminds me to as early back as, say, PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, where it's very important what the hardware ships with, or even with Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Microsoft made it keen to ship every Xbox One with Kinect initially, because that way, you know, Microsoft and all the developers know that every Xbox One owner has a Kinect camera. That way they have the confidence of developing a game that can possibly use Kinect features, because they know every Xbox One owner has that Kinect. And so again, back to the PS3 360 example, Sony shipped the PS3 with a hard disk drive as a standard feature. So every developer could develop a game that, say, requires a partition onto that hard drive. They know that it's got a Blu-ray drive, right? So every game can fill up, you know, a 55 gigabyte what was that, dual layered Blu-ray disc. It's very important that whatever the unit ships with, I mean, it's everything that the hardware maker knows developers really want to take advantage of, right? So now we're in a situation where they both have SSDs. That means games can really be designed around that aspect, and so it really does open up a multitude of possibilities. I mean, we could not be in this weird scenario nowadays where something of a poorly optimized game like Crash Team Racing has these really bizarre, like, minute-long loading times. I mean, even something like that might not be a scenario anymore, right? But you could have a thing where you have this really ambitious open-world game where you can go into any building and go out and not see a loading screen. Or, you know, fast travel really is, you know, less than 1 second. So even though you might still have an open world game that's exactly the same as what we see currently on PS4 and anything prior than that, you just won't have to wait for anything anymore. I mean, that's what I wish we could hear more of, but understandably, a developer at any sort of reputable big studio, they're probably under an NDA and they can't really talk about these things, but they're probably really pumped about this, for sure. They're probably very excited about the possibilities of what they can do on next gen, knowing that both machines are shipping with SSD, right? And so I wish I could be a fly on the wall to hear the conversations that take place of, like, okay, you know, we're starting development of our next game. It's aimed for, say, next-gen platforms. And let's say a game starting development right now. So it would take anywhere from 3, 4, 5 years of a development cycle. Let's say they're building completely new assets and everything like that. It's completely new IP. So it wouldn't be a thing where it would ship on PS4 and Xbox One. If they were starting development right now, and it it comes out 4 or 5 years later, it would probably be exclusively a next-gen game. I mean, you could have some pretty fascinating ideas floating around that boardroom right now, discussing, like, how could we take advantage of this? How can we make our game around this now, knowing that we have so much more freedom than we previously did? That's what really excites me. Moving on, let's talk about this GameStop story. So every so often we talk about GameStop. I don't really want to pound on them every single time there's news about them. But this one I think is certainly up for discussion, which is that, you know, obviously they've been on a pretty huge downward spiral. I mean, I think they're trading on the stock market now for, like, somewhere around $5, which is heinously low. I mean, they're not really doing well. And I think their dividend yield, too, is like 30-something%, which is, like, really bad news for a company. But anyway, they've announced a new initiative. So with this global initiative firm, or innovation firm, excuse me, they're going to be testing out a bunch of select locations and basically completely redesigning the store layout and more or less completely changing what you really do in the store, which is that it'd be a number of different things. And again, it would be tested in various different markets. So each store, I believe, is going to be designated to try 1 or 2 of these things, but you'd have, local tournaments. You'd be one where you could test a lot of games, like a multitude of games before you purchase. Another one would be completely focused on retro-style games and older consoles and things like that. And the last time I think we really talked about GameStop in this capacity, where it's like, the company obviously has to change in some way, shape, or form if they even want a chance at staying alive. And the thing is, I'm a believer in GameStop, and I honestly hate shopping at GameStop nowadays. I haven't shopped at a GameStop in such a long time, and so obviously those are weird words to come out of my mouth, but I believe that they can certainly find a place in today's age. And I think those are some good avenues to certainly explore. I think it really is a thing where it's like, okay, well, there's no getting around it. I mean, you're going to have to downsize. There's no way you can keep all those stores open, especially in certain markets where there's just not enough of a customer base. I mean, there's definitely going to be some downsizing going on. You could only, you could definitely have a few of these marquee stores in very high volume areas, but you would have to evolve it into something that makes more sense today in 2019, which is that you could do a social area of some sort, right? So yeah, I mean, you're certainly selling products and services and whatnot. I mean, you have to be a business that generates money. You can't just invite people to come hang out, but the store could certainly live as a social space where it's a great place to come and hang out. A local tournament sounds like a great idea, I think, for a lot of places. I think retro store, I think, is a pretty tough sell just based off the fact that you've got a lot of local mom and pop game shops that have closed in the past 5-10 years, so that's really kind of, I think, a pretty tough space and certainly very niche. I think that could only maybe work in a very few select markets, unless you want to, smash all three of these things into one storefront, but typically GameStop stores aren't that very large to begin with, so at that point you're either expanding or buying new storefronts or leasing out new buildings. I don't think that's really on the cards for GameStop based on their current cash flow. I mean, the thing is, the company's not doing that bad. They're on a decline, but they're not like a company that's not making money. They're still making money, so they can do these things now while they have the chance. I think it's really late in the game now for them to do something like this, but yeah, I mean, this is coming from somebody, again, who doesn't. I have hated shopping at GameStop. I hate the experience. I hate being upsold on used products. I hate being asked constantly about pre-ordering games. I've always found it to be kind of a, I don't know, for lack of better words, kind of an anti-consumer and insidious environment. I don't know. I'm making it sound way worse than it is, but that's how I feel going into that store. But I don't want them to go away. I want them to evolve into something that is more fun and more inviting. And so that's what the company's doing right now, and we'll see what happens. So we've got a new survey for cloud gaming and how gamers feel about it, and sure enough, this one's not very encouraging like the previous one we discussed, but Broadband Genie did this in collaboration with Eurogamer, I believe, so they polled some UK gamers, and 62% prefer physical media still. And a whopping 86% said that if the price of the game was the same as physical or digital download, they would not want to purchase a game on a streaming service, kind of implying directly to what Google Stadia is offering, which is that it's its own platform and you can buy the games per title. And so even though it's a streaming service, I mean, you can pay a flat fee of, say, $60 and constantly have access to streaming that game. And we don't even really have to get into these numbers. It's just, nobody wants to do this, right? It's going to be such a long time before any of these services, I think, make a really huge, meaningful impact. It's such an early game discussion, it really is. And that's why I think Sony and Microsoft are actually doing it the right way right now, which is that they're still offering traditional hardware and discs. I mean, you're just seeing a lot of these companies look at other industries and go, that's where music went, that's where television and film went, surely that's where games are going to go. And yeah, just not now. The current audience is saying that they don't want to stream their video games. I mean, it's more than likely not going to happen within the next 3, 4, 5 years, and I wouldn't be surprised if it took longer than 5 years for streaming to really make a meaningful impact, because the current audience is saying they don't want to stream their games. Now, let's get into Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code, and I'd like to congratulate Nathan Clark. You have won this week's $10 code. I'll be contacting you very soon via email, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's so simple. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and the winner will be announced next week. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about, you guys. So if you didn't see, the Tuesday video was PlayStation 5, everything we know so far. I did something like this about a year ago, but back then that was entirely rumor-based, but that's different now. We actually have official info from Sony about what the platform actually is going to be like and what their strategy is with the platform. And so we actually break down both of them, official news from Sony and then all the rumors that we've heard so far about the things that we don't know 100% just yet. So if you want to get caught up in everything PlayStation 5, that is the perfect video to go check that out. The upcoming Tuesday video, I think what we're actually going to do And I'm pretty sure I'll be able to do this just because I need to make sure that I have everything filmed and edited in time. But I think we're actually going to do 2 videos this week. So one will be on Monday and one will be on Wednesday. I have come into a very interesting PlayStation product that I think is so cool. And so it'll be kind of a 2-parter. We'll unbox it, take a close look at it and whatnot. And then the second video will be a deeper dive and do a certain part of the system. It's going to be very cool. I'm sure a lot of you are going to find it pretty fascinating because I'm like in love with this thing. And so stay tuned for that. I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing 2 videos next week. Other than that, though, that's pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.